Tittle, the story, the phantom convoy of Interstate 80. Welcome to Nightmare Junction, where every road leads deeper into the unknown. Tonight's story isn't fiction. It's a first-hand account from a veteran trucker who saw something no GPS can explain. 3 trucks followed him down Interstate 80, matching his every move. But when he finally looked in his mirrors, there was no one behind the wheel. Buckle up, because this convoy doesn't stop for the living. You are watching back-to-back stories. You ever find yourself driving alone at night, only to realize you are not as alone as you thought? Imagine 3 trucks following you for hours, matching your every move. But when you finally look in the mirrors, there is no one behind the wheel. This is not just a ghost story, this happened. And you're about to find out how close one trucker came to joining a convoy of the dead. Danny Rodriguez was no stranger to the road. A seasoned trucker with 15 years of cross-country hauls under his belt, he had seen every kind of weather, road condition, and late-night oddity you could imagine, but nothing prepared him for what happened on Interstate 81 frozen night in February 2019. He was eastbound hauling electronics from California to Chicago when the snowstorm hit earlier than expected. Though the snow had let up, the bitter cold remained, and the highway stretched empty. Before him, it was quiet, too quiet. Then he noticed them 3 trucks in perfect formation trailing behind him. Their headlights were distant, but clear. They did not pass, they did not fall back. They simply followed. Every time Danny changed speed, they mirrored him perfectly. He slowed down, they slowed down. He sped up, they sped up. At first, he thought maybe they were running together, a convoy. Maybe, but something fell off. He reached for his CB radio and called out on Channel 19, asking if anyone was running behind him. Static, total silence. Not even the usual trucker banner or weather updates, just static. And something else, if he listened closely, it almost sounded like whispers buried under the static, low and unintelligible. He tried switching channels, but the same result: static and those strange background murmurs, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. He checked his mirrors again. The truck stayed in formation, still not passing, still not speaking. And then he noticed they were older trucks, maybe from the 80s or early 90s. No company logos, no side lights, just bright headlamps and black silhouettes as the miles ticked by the sense of isolation. Deep in, no other vehicles passed. Westbound, no cars exited ahead. No sign of life beyond those 3 ghostly trucks. At mile marker 240, Danny pulled into a familiar rest stop, just a gravel lot with vending machines and a restroom facility. He parked and waited to see if the trucks would pass, but they did not. They pulled in 2 still in formation, still idling at the far end of the lot. Danny stepped out into the biting cold and looked around. There were no other truckers, no movement. The building looked normal, but when he tried the restroom, it was locked. A shaky handwritten sign on the door read "Closed." Until further notice, that was enough for him. He climbed back into his truck and pulled out of the rest stop, not caring about his schedule or a needed distance. But as he merged back onto the highway, the trucks followed again, seamlessly, like they were tethered to him. Around mile marker 285, things went from eerie to terrifying. His engine began to overheat. Suddenly, a smell of burning coolant filled the cab. The gauges spiked, and warning lights blinked as he pulled over to the shoulder. Just before the truck died completely, Danny sat in silence, breathing heavily, watching his mirrors as the trucks passed one by one. And that is when he saw it. The cabs were empty. No drivers, no movement, not even shadows inside, just perfectly preserved empty seats and glowing headlights. The last truck had faded lettering on the back, Westbound Freight Company. That name sparked something in Danny's memory. A trucking magazine story from years ago about a small Wyoming company whose drivers vanished in a 1987 snowstorm. Their trucks were found on I-80, engines running, but the cabs frozen solid, no bodies ever recovered. It was a ghost story among truckers, something no one really believed until now. Danny tried his CB again, hoping for help, but instead he heard the whispers return. This time, they were clearer. 3 voices chatting about weather, traffic, and truck stops, referencing places that no longer existed. Then one voice mentioned a broken-down rig at mile marker 285. That is where Danny was. The second voice laughed cold and hollow, saying, "Leave him, he'll join us soon enough." Danny froze. They were talking about him. He clutched the wheel. His headlights reappeared in the rearview mirror. The same trucks had turned around and were barreling toward him in reverse, their lights flickering like fire As they screeched to a stop behind his trailer, a door slammed and footsteps crunched in the snow. A voice called out from the darkness, offering help. Engine trouble, friend. We can give you a ride. Know these roads real. Well, the voice was friendly, but wrong like it had been buried in ice for years, and just now thawed. Danny stayed perfectly still, heart pounding. Then came 3 slow knocks on his door, and the chilling sentence, "Come on, Danny, open up, and we'll get you warmed up real nice." Just when it felt like something would tear his door open, salvation arrived, flashing red and blue lights. A state trooper pulled in behind the trucks. The trucks flickered under the strobes, revealing rusted bodies, flat tires, shattered windows, and frost-covered cabs. They looked ancient, then just like that they vanished. The trooper helped Danny repair a coolant hose that should not have failed. Then he admitted Danny was not the first to report strange convoys. Near mile marker 285, always in winter, always silent, always matching every move. He said files dated back 30 years, including the 1987 case. Danny made his delivery in Chicago, but never drove that route again. He now takes a longer southern road when crossing Wyoming too. Extra days of driving, he says, is better than spending eternity in a ghost convoy. So if you're ever driving alone at night on Interstate 80 and you see 3 trucks behind you matching your every move, do not slow down. Do not stop. Just keep going. Because some convoys are not looking for a destination. They are looking for a new driver. And they do not take no for an answer. Second story. He took a wrong turn and entered nowhere. Have you ever driven into a town that doesn't show up on any map? No GPS, signal, no radio, no signs of life. But once you enter, you can't leave. Welcome back to Nightmare Junction tonight. We follow a lone trucker who made a wrong turn into a place called Millfield, a town that shouldn't exist, a town that doesn't want you to leave. It was just supposed to be a routine run for Kyle Mercer, a midnight haul through Nebraska on his way to Denver. He'd been on the road for 16 hours, eyes dry, brain fog, coffee wasn't cutting it anymore. And his CB had gone quiet hours ago. No chatter, no weather updates, just static. Nebraska had a way of stretching out flat and endless until your sense of time and direction bled into the road. Kyle had passed exit 107 like he always did, but then noticed a detour sign that wasn't there the week before. Bright orange and freshly staked detour, Highway 72 West, followed by another sign, local access only. Millfield. Kyle had never heard of Millfield, but he figured it might be a shortcut. Small towns usually had 24-hour gas stations, vending machines, or at least a bathroom. He took the turn without a second thought. That's when things started to change. The blacktop narrowed the lines, faded the road, dipped into a valley surrounded by pine trees, far too dense for that part of Nebraska. And then there was the fog, not thin rolling fog, but thick sheets like smoke from a forest fire. Kyle slowed down, wipers squeaking over dry glass. But the mist clung to his windshield like it didn't want him to see. After what felt like 30 minutes crawling through the fog, lights appeared ahead, but not from another car. They were street lamps flickering with a weird yellow hue, casting shadows in wrong directions. Then came the sign, wooden carved, "Welcome, T.O. Millfield, Pop 1033, but someone had scratched out the number and written 1032 in red marker. Beneath it, the hairs on Kyle's arm stood up. He rolled into town square, if you could call it that. 3 blocks of old buildings, general store, diner, post office, all looked frozen in the 1950s. No neon, no logos, just paint peeling off brick. The diner was open, or at least the lights were on. He parked his rig by the curb and stepped into silence. No wind, no crickets, no music playing from inside, just the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Inside the diner, it was warm, too warm, like someone had turned the heat up to desert levels. The booths were all empty, except for one in the corner. A woman sat stirring coffee, but her cup was empty. Her hand just circled air. Her eyes never blinked. Kyle greeted her cautiously. She didn't look up, didn't react. He moved to the counter, rang the bell, nothing. Then a man walked out from the kitchen, a tall, thin guy, wearing a butcher's apron stained with something dark, but his eyes were the real problem, too wide, too bright, too focused, like he had been waiting for Kyle. "You must be passing through." The man said. "We don't get many new folks these days." Kyle nodded and asked for directions back to the highway. The man just smiled. "Highway's gone, son. You're in Millfield. Now might as well rest a while." Kyle stepped back, unease growing. He turned to leave, but the door didn't open. The handle turned, but the frame stayed, still like the building was part of one solid block. He kicked it, yelled, tried the window. Nothing. The waitress still stirred her empty cup. The man with the apron watched in silence. Then the lights flickered, and everything outside changed. The street was now pitch black, except for the glowing windows of the diner. The fog had returned thicker this time, almost green. Kyle sprinted for the back, but found only a brick wall. Where the kitchen used to be, no doors, no exit, just silence, and that low hum in his ears like pressure from deep underwater. Suddenly the man spoke again. "We all took a wrong turn, Kyle. You'll get used to it. You just gotta forget where you were going. That's how it works." Kyle ran back to his rig, threw into gear, and floored at the truck responded. But the road outside no longer led back the way. He came at curve in a wide circle, bringing him back to the town square. In less than 2 minutes, every direction led back to Millfield. Left, right, reverse, even off-road the trees closed in. No GPS, no signal, no stars above. Just Millfield, like it was sitting in its own little pocket of reality. He tried sleeping in his truck engine, running doors locked, but the dreams came, dreams of people with hollow eyes waving at him from inside the diner, dreams of his rig rusting into the ground while he sat motionless in a booth stirring coffee that wasn't there when he woke up. The fuel gauge had dropped like he had been idling for days, and the sign at the edge of town now read Pop 1031. Kyle began noticing other trucks parked throughout the town, some covered in moss and ivy, others clean like they had just arrived. He never saw the drivers, but sometimes at night he heard CB chatter in short, sharp bursts, all of it from Channel 19, same as always, but the voices weren't right. They echoed too long. The static was deeper, like it came from inside the earth. He heard names being called, repeated over and over, sometimes his own. One night, he finally answered the CB. A woman's voice came through, soft, clear. "You're not supposed to talk back, how you'll make it harder to forget." Then static, then silence. Days, weeks, maybe months passed. He stopped counting. The sun never really rose, just sort of glowed weakly behind the clouds. He tried writing letters to his dispatcher, tried breaking into the post office to send them, but the letters never left. They were always back on his dashboard the next day. Unopened, always the same note written in red across the envelope: "Stay in your lane." Eventually, he walked the perimeter of Millfield, every road, every alley, even the fields beyond the pine trees. It all looped, every path curved back into the square. Sometimes he'd find copies of himself in the windows, reflections that didn't match his movements. One even smiled at him. Then came the final sign. The diner now had a help wanted sign, and beneath it a second sign that read now, "Hiring night shift manager." Kyle looked inside. The waitress was gone. The booth was empty, and the coffee pot steamed fresh like it had been waiting. He walked in again just to see if anything had changed, and it had. There was now a plaque above the counter: "Employee of the Month, Kyle Mercer." His own photo, smiling dead-eyed. Beneath it, the man in the apron was gone. A fresh apron hung behind the counter. The seat was warm, the cup full. He sat down, not because he gave up, but because it was the only thing left to do. If you ever see a sign from Millfield glowing through the fog, don't stop, don't turn, and don't be curious. Because once that town learns your name, it writes you into its story, and no map will ever show you the way out. Third story. Story 3. The Shadow on Channel 19. Rewritten in full, single paragraph narration ready. They say Channel 19 is the trucker's lifeline, the place to hear chatter about roadblocks, weather cops hiding under overpasses. But for Daniel Kane, Channel 19 became the frequency of something much darker, something that followed his rig through the high mountain passes of Wyoming and refused to let go. It started simple, just a late-night delivery from Salt Lake City to Cheyenne. He'd driven that stretch a dozen times, mostly uneventful, except for the occasional snow drift and the biting wind. But this time something fell off from the moment he passed the empty way station at mile marker 223. The CB crackled on its own. No one had touched the mic, but static hissed into the cabin. Daniel reached out, turned the volume down, thinking maybe it was sunspot interference, except it was 2 a.m. and the skies were clear. Then it happened. A voice cut through the static, a woman's voice barely above a whisper, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Channel 19, don't leave me, please don't. Leave me," over and over like a chant. Daniel assumed it was a prank, some bored driver playing games, or maybe a broken CB relaying old chatter. But when he asked if anyone else heard it, the line stayed dead silent. No truckers responded, no jokes, no confirmations. And then she said his name: "Dan, please, you have to help me. You're the only one left." That stopped him cold. He hadn't given his name on the channel. He never did. He slammed the brakes, pulling off to the shoulder, heart hammering. The highway was empty, black and wide, and endless on both sides of the rig, nothing but cold and snow and dead silence. He turned off the CB, but the voice kept coming. Channel 19, still buzzed, even without power. Dan, she's in the truck, look in your mirror. Daniel slowly turned the side mirror, expecting nothing, but he saw her. A shape in the sleeper cab behind the curtain, a silhouette standing completely still. He didn't scream, didn't move, just reached for the flashlight in his door pocket and whipped open the curtain, but nothing was there, just his clothes, cooler, and a pile of maps. He checked the locks, turned the engine off and on again, thinking maybe fatigue was making him hallucinate. For the next hour, he drove in total silence. No CB, no music, just the engine and the road, but the voice returned around 3 a.m., this time louder, more insistent. She told him her name was Jenna, and she'd been trapped since 1987, said she was a dispatcher, once got caught in a whiteout crash near Elk Mountain. No body was ever recovered. Her signal was never traced. She claimed the crash didn't kill her, at least not all of her. She was still stuck, still trying to reach someone on Channel 19. Daniel tried turning to Channel 20, then 21, then 23, all static. He returned to 19. And there she was again. Dan, you're getting close. I can see your lights. Just keep going past mile marker 240. He didn't want to, but part of him needed answers. As he approached the mile marker, the snow began falling fast. Visibility dropped instantly. Fog rolled in, and his headlights barely pierced through it. And then he saw it, a wreck half buried in snow, just off the shoulder, cab-over engine-style truck from the 80s covered in ice, but mostly intact. He hadn't seen it on the previous runs, and the snow didn't explain why there weren't any footprints, tire tracks, or rescue flags. The ID number on the side was scraped off, but the door had a name. Jenna scrawled and fading sharp at Daniel, stopped again, stepped out, this time armed with a tire iron. The moment his boots hit the ice, the air grew heavy like the fog itself pressed against him. Something in the air buzzed like power lines. He climbed up onto the ghost truck's running board, wiped a layer of frost from the driver's window. Inside the cab was clean, too clean. A CB mic hung loose from the dash, still powered, no battery pack. He opened the door, and the smell of burnt ozone flooded out. Then the mic hissed again, and the voice returned clearer than ever. You found me, you heard me, now let me in. That's when Daniel saw movement in his own truck. The lights flickered, the engine stuttered. He turned around and saw her for real this time, standing in front of his rig, pale, translucent, her face blurry like a radio signal caught mid-transmission. She wasn't threatening, but she wasn't right. Her eyes were static, mouse glitching like bad footage. He dropped the tire iron, stumbled back toward his cab. She followed, but not by walking. She just blinked forward like skipping frames on a VHS. Daniel barely made it inside, locked the doors, floored it back onto the highway. The rig growled, tires spun, but caught, and he drove blinded by snow. The CB screamed, Jenna's voice mixing with dozens of others, male, female, young, old, some begging, some angry, all layered like a chorus of the forgotten. You've just tuned into another signal from the forgotten highways of Nightmare Junction. If this story rattled your mirrors and chilled your soul, tap that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a detour into the unknown. We got more coming tomorrow. Same road, different nightmare. And remember, don't ever answer Channel 19 after midnight. He passed another truck headed the opposite way, flashing lights, horn blaring, as if warning him. The driver's face looked panicked, mouthing something he couldn't hear, and then silence again. The CB was dead. No power. The snow stopped instantly. Skies cleared. No fog, no Jenna. Daniel drove till sunrise, not stopping until he hit the first gas station in Cheyenne. When he explained what happened, the old man behind the counter just nodded knowingly. You're not the first she talks to. He said some drivers say she's real, some say she's bait, something that uses Channel 19 to lure you into places you don't come back from. Daniel quit trucking 2 weeks later, sold his rig, cut the CB from the dash, and burned it in his backyard. But every now and then when he's driving his pickup late at night, he still flicks on the radio, sometimes for the music, sometimes just to be sure, and when he hears a soft voice whispering his name through the static, he changes the station before she finishes her sentence. If you're still listening after all that, then you already know Nightmare Junction isn't just for truckers. It's a frequency for the lost, for the desperate, for those reaching out from the other side. And if you hear your name on it, don't answer.